Hey everybody, welcome to my little office in the back of my bricks and mortar businesses, hence the reason I've got my very bright orange jumper on today, which is my garage one. I have a brightly coloured sweatshirt for each business that I have. Today I'd like to talk about something called the grief cycle, which was set up by Professor Elizabeth Kubler-Ross when she was dealing with terminally ill patients, and she noticed that people went through different stages of emotion. And I am an avid fan of the Olympics. I've been watching all of them where I can, not getting up in the early hours of the morning, I hasten to add, but watching them where I can. And I've noticed how this shows up in the emotions and the behaviour and the communication of some of the athletes. So Kubler-Ross has said that there are 5 main stages in the grief cycle: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. And you can see this in the athletes when they face disappointment or they lose when they expected to win. I especially noticed it in a lady who was doing the women's weightlifting the other day, and she came in at a really high level and failed on the 3 attempts. And what I noticed was at first, the first one she thought she'd got it, she'd locked out the arm. And then the judges were shaking their head and saying, no, arm not locked out, disqualification. And what happened in that instance is she went into denial. She was shaking her head. She was going, no, that's not right. I locked out my arm. She was showing the judges, I locked out my arm. Look, this is what happened. And then she became angry and she threw the weights down on the floor and she was like, wow, she was shouting. Then she went into bargaining mode. So her team and her called for a VAR decision, for it to be looked at on the video to see that her arm was locked out. Again, this was turned down. So her head dropped forward, her shoulders shrunk forward, and there were tears. That sadness came. And then finally, she came back out on the stage and she bowed to all 3 judges and she accepted what the decision was. And this shows up in our own lives on a regular basis. It happens in seconds. So more research has been done on this grief cycle, and it's found that when we have change or disappointment or we're going through something in our life, then we'll often go through these 5 cycles of emotions. Not necessarily in a particular order, but they will show up at some stage. Now, the beauty of this is, if you are going through a cycle of change or a cycle of grief, is it doesn't help with the emotion. Of course, it's not going to stop the emotion. You can't control that. That's the way the body works, the way of the mind. It's a grieving process. But it sometimes helps if you know where you are on the cycle, so you know you're experiencing this, and actually it's okay to be there. Just that acceptance of, do you know what, it's okay to feel like this. But also it's about that self-reflection piece. So the athletes that have had that terrible disappointment during the Olympics, which they've trained for so many years, this is a life's work, they'll go back and they'll reflect on their performance. And the majority of them will come back bigger and better and stronger, because they will have spent time being conscious about what happened, how they can improve and what they can do better. And the link here with communication is it's exactly the same. That when we reflect on our communication, when we go through a process, when we become emotional and the words and the behaviour we use are very different than the ones we would normally use, we can reflect on those conversations. It's hard when you're caught up in the moment to stop. It's really hard to stop and push that pause button when you're caught up in the emotion. But afterwards you can reflect and think about, okay, well, what was it that triggered me? What happened there? How do you behave when your emotions are triggered? What behaviour, what communication are you using? And then gradually, the more conscious but you become aware of it, like anything in life, the more practice, the more conscious you become of it, the easier it is to then press that big pause button and stop before those emotions take over and you say and do things that you wouldn't normally and that you might regret. Have a great day. I hope that helps, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.